Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. We're doing Loki, episode 6, the finale for all time, always.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it starts with them outside the door of the castle. What I thought was interesting about this was Sylvie asking Loki, kind of as a callback, like, "Oh, do you think I shouldn't kick in the door?" What was interesting about it, not that it was a callback, but that Loki was like not even down to joke around. He was just like, "No, like let's get this done." And he doubles down on checking in with her. He says, like, "Is everything okay?" So obviously they both are taking this seriously. She's just trying to make light of the situation, and he's being deadly serious about checking in with her and being like, "Is everything okay?"
Yeah, he's being so incredibly supportive. So like, hey, I'm really taking everything about this seriously. And she's just like, hey, the gravity of this, it's hard for me to, realize that we're finally here, right, literally on the doorsteps.
Yes. I at first was kind of like, "Oh yeah, she's being funny," but then I'm like, no, like she's obviously, I can read on her face that this is serious to her too. She's just,
the anxiety is just building up, and like, I guess defense mechanisms or what have you. But I mean, she's fully like, I like that pause that she's like, hey, just right outside the door is like, hey, whole life has been building up to this moment. We're just gonna take a deep breath and all that kind of stuff. Don't know if it happens there or right before.
It's in that moment,
they're about to meet the next fellas, but yeah, that moment in itself is just
before they open the door.
Yeah, it's a nice thing where it's like, this is what I like about longer format stuff, is that we get those little moments that are really nice and genuine and very human, and it's really like longer runtime, I should say, not longer format, but
I knew what you meant. It's longer than a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, longer, more time to spend with these characters.
Yeah. So they go in. Miss Minutes interrupts them and gives them the offer of, she seemed to really lean more into Loki. Like she seemed to be really involved with like, hey, like you can actually beat the Avengers, you can kill Thanos, you can have the Infinity Gauntlet. And then for Sylvie, she was kind of just like, I don't know, you want some like happy memories to wake up with? You can have that. And the two of you can be together. So I was just like, why didn't she put as much effort into the Sylvie thing? But I think I'll probably come back to that because it was something that kind of bothered me about this series, not necessarily this episode.
Right.
But
in that moment, I definitely took it more to be like Loki would be, of the two, more malleable in terms of like the offer is like, oh, we could probably actually tempt Loki more than we can tempt Sylvie.
Oh, you think like we're not gonna even bother thinking of something for her?
Yes, because like, I mean, in the sense where they literally took so much from her, it's just like at that point, what can you offer her that would actually be of value? For Loki, he's had and even seen his future play out with the whole like, oh, this is what happens when I pretend to be Odin for like a summer, and it's hedonistic Asgard for like that one little brief period of time. What he sees how it plays out, and he's like, yeah, okay, maybe I could pick a different route and set my life on a different trajectory and all this kind of stuff, but then still be tempted with that that success of like that offer of like, you could kill Thanos, you could be that big person, whatever that might be to you, you could play that to be the hero and all that kind of stuff. To me, it seemed like Loki would be the one that would take that more than Sylvie ever would, and that's why I thought
this still plays into what I think is wrong with the show. But I can see that. I can see that line of thinking. I think it is at odds with what I feel this show was trying to accomplish, but I see what you mean. But basically, Sylvie rejects it. She just says, well, that's fiction. And Loki doubles down by saying, well, we write our own destiny. I only bring that up because that is going to be important later, even though Miss Minutes in the moment's like, okay, sure, yeah, of course you do. Good luck with that. She leaves. Then she goes to Renslayer and she gives her the files she thinks Renslayer needs, not the ones that Renslayer specifically asked for. That's just something that will never pay off for us in this season. So
yeah,
I
not
guess
in this season. Yeah,
we'll figure that out later. And I believe at this point, okay, yeah. Then this is when Sylvia and Loki legitimately meet the version of Kang in this show, which I believe, based on the way he's dressed, is Immortus.
Yes,
they call him He Who Remains, which is a different character than Immortus, but I don't think He Who Remains is a version of Kang. So I think they just use that wording, but he is dressed so the optics of it looks like Immortus, which is a version of Kang.
Correct.
So for the purposes of this episode, I will just be calling him Immortus moving forward.
That's more than valid. I'm gonna get that mixed up a few times and definitely call him Kang for sure. But
I just want people to know, like, I get what this show was doing in terms of being like, this isn't technically Kang, but
I get what you.
So for the purposes of this, instead of being like it's a variant, it's Immortus, because that's the version of Kang they chose to use.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that clarification, because I definitely would have gotten my words
and because
names
he sees
sure.
And he sees it like the other people are variants of him as opposed to him being a variant. So that's why I'm just saying, for this purpose, it makes sense that he believes he is Immortus, and we as the audience can just see this as this was Immortus, who is technically the nicest of the Kangs in the comics, even though they're all bad news. He is the nicest, which makes sense for the show. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way. I will be saying Immortus. It doesn't really matter if you call him Kang. We all get the idea.
Yeah, but the show officially calls him He Who Remains.
Well,
and he likes that title too.
It doesn't even officially call him that. He just says, "Yeah, I've had a bunch of names."
Yeah,
and then he says, "Oh, Miss Minutes still calls me that. That's interesting."
And then he's like, "Oh, I like it." I really like the way he does that too. It's just, oh god.
But yeah, he's Immortus, and instead of trying to fight them, he's just like, "Yeah, just come talk to me." He's a pretty relaxed guy, and they realize he is relaxed because he knows he can't kill them, or they can't kill him, because he's seen it all up until
he's
a point.
All knowing.
So he has programmed his temp pad so that it will always move him out of the way whenever they're about to try and kill him. Very cool visual, just interesting in general. Then we see Mobius confront Renslayer, and I really like this. Again, it's kind of what I said last time, like exactly what I thought was happens, which is B-15 wasn't pruned, so she was there to run this plan with Mobius.
Right.
Their plan was to purposefully not go to a apocalypse timeline so that they would be followed, and that timeline specifically is 2018 Fremont, Ohio, where I can't remember the woman's name, but it's Gugu Mbatha-Raw, and she is, I guess, whoever Renslayer was before Renslayer became Renslayer.
Correct.
In the school. And so it's basically, this is irrefutable evidence for any other hunter out there to be like, oh yeah, they are lying to us. And what I like about it is they aren't just saying it. It's like, just watch how this plays out when she comes in the room. She has no idea who Renslayer is. And so you can see that we were something before we got here. So it's a very good plan. I'm glad that worked out for them. But that's that beat.
It's a nice way of being like, hey, look, it's not Sylvie that brainwashed us or tricked us into an illusion. Like, this is legitimate proof that you cannot refute that we are all variants and all that kind of stuff. And I love that angle of it. But to me, it's less like the optics of like, how many did they convince? Like 2 or 3 people?
No, a bunch. The idea is they kept running that scam.
They kept like cycling.
They could bring those people back. They kept cycling. That's why the whole point is he comes in there and she starts going for a hunter, and he's like, "That's not going to That's not going to work now that we know who you really or what you." I can't remember what he said. It's not going to work. We figured you out. We know who you really are.
Yeah,
throwing up the pen. So I think we get to see an example of it working. But my thinking is that obviously they've been doing this for a bunch of the hunters.
Yeah, because this is one of the things that I didn't catch in on with the seeing the Renslayer in the school. Was the last name was not Renslayer, right?
No, it's
No,
something
it
else.
was.
I just don't remember what
Yeah,
the name is.
I can't remember what last
It
name was,
is.
but I made a note of being like, hey, that's not Renslayer and all that kind of stuff. So whether or not that's a title, how she links to Kang in like source material and all that kind of stuff,
That
it's all like a
name
very
is
interesting thing for sure.
that name is an alias that
Mhm.
Renslayer takes in the comics.
Yeah. So very, very cool adaptation here. So whether she's fully in on it, we're getting more evidence here because like Miss Minutes, when she does visit Renslayer, says like, here, he says you would need these files. No, I can't remember. Did her face have like he as like a questioning kind of standpoint, or like he as in like, yes, I know exactly who you're talking about. All that
No
kind of
idea.
stuff.
I've
Yeah.
moved on from that scene, so I don't
Fair
know.
enough.
I don't-
Okay.
Yeah,
Fair
sorry.
enough. Yeah.
I guess the reason I didn't get
Mhm.
into it too much is because I'm like, I like with this show, who cares? Like, it's like
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know where
it's
they're going with
right.
this, and this like I don't understand the point of putting in a scene like that.
Yeah, and then the one of the final scenes of the of the whole episode itself, I guess of the series, like goes like, yeah, the show doesn't care, and it's kind of interesting. And I know we'll get there when we get there,
Yeah.
which is why I'm not saying what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I just was like, okay, this obviously it happens.
Mhm.
We know that that's a thread for next season. I just
Yep.
it was disappointing in a 6-episode season to have a thread like that. But yeah, I don't know. If she was confused, sure, but I don't know. Next, oh yeah, I put this all together. So like I do know that they switch back and forth, but I was just like, I'll just
Mhm.
put in all the Mobius stuff right in one chunk. So basically after that he's like, so basically now everyone knows that the TVA is a lie, which is why I felt like that was confirmation that they've done it to more than just 2 hunters, because who else would care about that thing other than people who work at TVA. So he was like, yeah, everyone knows it's a lie, and she says, well, it's a necessary one. And then I feel like she says that like a knee-jerk reaction, and then she just, I feel like it was more real when she was like, well, I have to believe that, like I need to believe that this is necessary. Something tells me, yeah, like obviously not to the same extent, based on when we know when she was picked up in 2018, but I would imagine she feels like her life was lost as well. Everyone would, but it seems like for her, she feels like something in particular was taken from her, as opposed to just a past life. So I feel like she's like, yeah, like this is the sacrifice I'm willing to make whatever happened to me worth it. So
Yeah,
I think that was her being more real when she said that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to weigh in on that scene because it's just hard to weigh in on that character at this point in time. Just because I'm like, I still don't know what's going on with her because there's so many like slimes going on, so many like cons and double cons within a con, like Mobius would say. It's tricky with that character for sure.
It is tricky, and but one thing that I do think is important is they do kind of get to the heart of it, which is Mobius is like, well, we can get people to have free will again, and she laughs that off, and she's like, no one's gonna have free will other than the person who controls all this. And I don't know if she is talking about Kang or if she is kind of like, I can be that person that controls all of this. But yeah, she basically is like, don't kid yourself, which makes sense because he's like, well, no, like we can work on this together, and she's like, nah, not into it. And then he brings out the pruning stick, and much like when Sylvie had it on her, she doesn't say it in the same way, but she's like, even with that, you're like, you're of no danger to me. That's not going to be a problem. And a bit more character development. I know she's just saying this to gaslight him, but I think there must be a kernel of truth to it, that she feels, he says, you betrayed me, and she's like, no, you betrayed me. You threw away eons of our friendship for 2 Lokis. Yes, that makes sense if I thought the show was following through on why Loki in particular are so special in this universe, but this episode kind of is like, they don't really matter. That like
It
being a
doesn't.
Loki in general doesn't really make you that special.
Yeah, in the
But that
grand scheme of
insult,
things,
yeah,
like
like
that particular variant of that particular character, we were led to believe in the series, anyways. That's like, hey, that's the one that's going to screw up everything always, and that's why it's always like policing that one, or at least from the story perspective.
yeah.
Um, or you know,
But
it's weird.
I should be clear, I really like this episode, but in terms of how everything fits together, uh,
In the series, yeah, because you're right. It's easy to love this episode,
yeah.
but it's like if you put it in the grand scheme of overall everything, you're just like this. And I don't know if you want me to say this now, but this series just seems like a whole setup for everything
Yeah.
else. You know, and it's just
Yeah.
like if that's a complaint about Iron Man 2, then I'm like, why are people like
They're
fan
so
gushing
happy
over
about this.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
don't get it. I'm like, it's the same exact logic of like everything seems fan service, everything seems pushed, and everything seems like, oh, and now it's the official launch off of phase 4,
Yeah.
which is a weird feeling, you know?
Well, yeah, we will get
Mhm.
there, but I 100% agree with you.
Mhm.
That was my exact feeling. But so basically, he goes at her. She knocks him down very easily. And he goes, well, here I am again. I guess this is a callback to the first episode where it's him looking up at her once again.
Mhm.
And he says, where are you going? And she says, in search of free will. So again, I don't know if she means like she's taking free will for herself by
Yeah,
controlling everything. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
because
But
yeah, this series makes it seem like she's legitimately trying to go after He Who Remains in like a no, I'm gonna get free will for myself. But it's just like, okay, well, we know that there's a love interest thing, so I don't know if that love interest angle is
well,
going to
we
be
don't know
played out at
anything.
all. No, well, I mean, in the source material, I mean,
Yeah,
we know
but
that it is
I
existent, but we don't know if it's going to be brought to screen here.
like the same way they did
or,
Thanos, they didn't introduce any type of love interest for him. So I don't. That's why I would say
true.
that's more why I'm saying we don't
Mhm.
know anything because we don't
True.
know what aspects of this character they will bring to the screen. So
Yeah.
I am not going to use too much source material for stuff like that. Just
Mhm.
if they're throwing it in our face, like, hey, this is the name
Like-
that Ravonna Renslayer used when she was on Earth for the 2018 version, then I can be like, yeah, I
Yeah.
get the connection. Or
Yeah.
if they're going to throw it in our face, like, hey, Jonathan Majors is dressed like Immortus, then I'll be like,
Mhm.
I'm assuming he's playing Immortus.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying, hey, don't have any theories. It's more just like, I can't say, like, well, I guess we're going to have to find out what the love interest thing is because I'm like, I don't know what they're going to adapt. And
Mhm.
they did Thanos very well without adapting a very key element of his story,
True.
which was the love of death.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Whether or not they play that out on screen has yet to be seen. We just know that the source material links those two together. But
Mhm.
I mean, in the sense, is it like, is she actually going after him? That because that's the last time we see Renslayer is like going after
Yep.
free will, and I'm just like that. Always read to me initially as like, is she gonna go kill him? That confuses me, kind of deal. And if so, does that mean she actually knows where he is and how to get there? And you know, it's a weird send off. Or last time I see that character in this series, it's just like it leaves so many questions, which is a good thing. But it's just like
I would say
don't
of
think
the
those-
characters, her and B15 at least have good places to end where I'm like,
yes,
that makes sense. For me,
Mhm.
this scene with Mobius was weird because I feel like
Mhm.
people see him as the co-lead of the show. And I think both he and Loki are put in positions of being so ineffectual in what is ostensibly their story.
Yes, I would agree with that.
They kind of leave Mobius on the ground,
Mhm.
and I genuinely can't tell if part of his plan was to just get knocked down and have her leave. Like,
Right.
and I'm not saying they need to show me, but I'm so confused just by the way they're using the characters in this series about like, so is that a plan or
Mhm.
did we really just watch him lose? And not only just lose, but that's the last time we're going to, not the last time. This is the last meaningful scene we're going to have with this Mobius.
Yeah.
And he basically just was like, oh yeah, I guess she did what she wanted. And I'm like, that's a weird thing. That's a weird place to leave a character at this point in your
Mhm.
story that you think is one of the leads. The same, and I have the same criticism of what they do with Loki.
Mhm.
He doesn't really get to actually affect anything in his story, and I
No,
find
he
that
doesn't.
it's way too passive of something for a lead. And if I am comparing the three shows, no other titular character has been this ineffectual in their show to
Yeah.
this point.
It gives me a lot of the Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of vibes.
I feel like
where
it's worse than that, because at
Yeah.
least with Raiders of the Lost Ark, you think they're doing something,
Yeah.
and then you just think about it, and you're like, oh no, then like same thing you said with Thor Ragnarok. Like you can at least as get swept
Yeah,
up
that's
in
right.
it and be like, hey, they did something, and then realize when you think
Like,
about it, oh,
wait,
they didn't. What? They could have just left everything alone, and everything would have been fine.
it
But
would have
like,
been the exact same spot where we ended up. Like bad guy
Yeah.
needs to open box destroys everything, everything goes back to status quo.
this one just has them.
Ragnarok, not so much, but yeah.
This one just has them be physically sidelined, and then you're like, oh, okay. So it's not
Yeah.
even like. Anyway, we'll get to it. But for the
Well, I
Mobius
mean,
thing, it is like it's just like
yeah.
he's knocked on his ass and then just has to watch the rest of this play out. Even when we see him again
Yeah.
with B-15, it's just him watching stuff play out, not being able to make anything happen.
Yeah. So to your point about Mobius and Loki being co-leads in this series and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Loki ends up in a spot where at least I'm like, okay, there's continual character growth. Like it's the same Loki. Finally, it's the
all his character growth
series
happened in the first episode, I feel.
Yeah, but I mean, in this final episode, it just cemented. It's like, no, this is who he is now. He's not joking around, at least in this scene. But you know what I kind of, he's kind of really gotten over that hump of like, oh, I can reach out and be vulnerable and all that kind of stuff and not joke around anymore and all that. Yeah, there is that is like, okay, here is the actual what that looks like. And he's like, nope, I'm not joking around. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to check in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Great partner in crime, whatever you might want to call this. But the idea of like, as an audience, we're not tricked like, oh, he's not dead again, like in every other iteration. And then he comes back. We're like, this is the same Loki, confirmed. And this is the growth he's went through, and it's cemented. In terms of Mobius, I'm just like, well, that was a whole lot of nothing and a lot of disservice to that character, I feel.
I mean, he learned a big thing about it. I'm just, if your argument is that they cemented the change they went through the season, so did Mobius, because he 100% believed that TVA needs to be stopped, and like
yes,
he said, like he stuck to it. They even give him a scene of being like, "There's no turning back now." Like he didn't think like, maybe we took on too much. Like if that is your argument of just like they demonstrated once again that they mean what they like, they've doubled down on what we already saw them do throughout, then yeah, both of them do the same thing. I think it's more important, and it's actually in the next scene when Immortus calls Loki a flea on the back of a dragon. Like that's how I feel. Like they're so insignificant to this realistically, because
you're right.
B-15 already had that revelation. She probably would have run that scam on her own. You don't need Mobius for that. He's just part of it. Like
Mobius just needed to free her. And that was
we don't even know if he did free her.
That's one of those conclusions we could reasonably come to with no reprimand, but it's just one of those things where you're right. It's just like, if that was a plan, him failing, was that a part of a plan? Was that a part of a plan to distract him? I couldn't tell, but I'm like, oh, it wasn't. He just actually screwed up and went without
don't know,
backup.
right? Like I don't know. Anything could happen in season 2 or season 3. I just my feeling is that right there, saying you were a flea on the back of a dragon, that means so much, because it really is like, yeah, you're holding on, like you're there just like Mobius. You're there when things are happening, but you're not actually doing anything. You're not affecting anybody with what you're doing. And so that's why, for me, that this show needed to really lean into the character growth for Loki, because it's, I don't know if I said it on mic, but yeah, you introduce Immortus in this last episode, he just engulfs everything. We need to, and I like this episode. I like this episode more than I like the 5th episode. What I'm saying though is it's all about him. And so out of necessity Loki is sidelined, but also when
Yes.
you piece everything together, you realize how little impact he had. And I'm very happy that Sylvie actually gets to be an active part of this, or B-15. But then we get into that awkward thing of, then why are these two white men being pushed to the forefront of this? Why, like, as people we're supposed to care about, if the people actually getting stuff done are Renslayer, B-15, and Sylvie. These are three characters. I mean, Immortus is great, but he just came now.
Yeah.
Out of the characters we ostensibly would have invested in, it's those three women that are actually active in this story, but they're not given enough time. And so that is basically, that's what I'm getting at, is that we've centered these two white men who are so inactive and very passive at the expense of these three women who actually were getting shit done throughout this whole season. So I think, and it's just an awkward thing in terms of narrative and optics. It's very awkward.
Good. Yeah, it's a very good take for sure.
But yeah, so yeah, I think that line really helped highlight what I thought was wrong with this season. Is that if we are just setting up the multiverse and this multiversal war, why write Loki this way then? Because obviously we're not dealing with love and control, which I still think plays into this, because it is essentially the love for Mobius, the love Mobius has for Renslayer that doesn't make him prune her and makes him try to talk to her, but she has the control in that situation. And it is the love Loki has for Sylvie that makes it so that he doesn't take her out and save the day, and actually gets kicked out into a different timeline. So that stuff all plays out, but the show isn't called Sylvie. The show isn't called Ravonna Renslayer.
It's called Loki.
It's Loki, and I'm like, well, then what are we doing here? It's just weird to me.
It's just one of those things, and it's a and to your point, it's one of those things where it makes it weird to write a show where about a villain character. That, I mean, and even with the point of Loki being someone that rides the villain title very, very loosely, and not well, it's just like, all you can serve to do is humanize him, but at the same time, if you play to that character's natural instincts, then you're playing them as a villain no matter what. And if you play them as a hero, then they eventually just step aside and, like, support other people in their journey, which is great. But like you said, this is Loki, not Sylvie. Maybe season 2 will be Loki and Sylvie, just kind of like, if we get a season 2 of like Captain America and the Winter Soldier. That would be consistent with, like, we don't have Falcon Winter Soldier now, we have Captain Winter Soldier season 2, we now have Loki and Sylvie season 2. I'm like, okay, maybe if that thematically makes sense, but so far we just have a confirmation of a season 2, but not a confirmation of a title change. So we'll see whether or not that has to be played out. But you're right, Loki seems very inconsequential to this whole series. It's the lost arc issue.
Yeah, so he's not that important to this story, I don't think. Only because Immortus says, I paved the way for both of you. Like, you got on my radar when you had that next, or I think he's even saying, I just knew from time that you two. Yeah,
it would be you two that would.
But so then I paved the way for you. So everything we think, and I get that people are like, well, he could be lying, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, if you're that excited about this multiverse thing, then you have to accept that he's right.
Yeah,
you can only really be excited about this if you believe what he's saying. And I think the way he's acting throughout all of this, which I loved, is someone who's like, I'm not afraid, because like only one of two things happen, and realistically one is just a longer version of the other version, which is me always coming back to this point.
Yeah, it's like, I would either come back, or you two might actually do it better than me, in which case, great, I don't have to do this anymore. Yeah, because he's like, I like the part where he's like, hey, I don't look it, but I am tired. And like the way they played that scene, I was like, this is why they cast Jonathan Majors, because he's such a great actor to pull us in so many different emotions in so many different ways, and like in a way that's just like, we're taking you seriously right now, and we're not writing you off as a joke in the way that those little eccentrics. I can never say that word.
Eccentricities.
Yes, I could never
Yeah.
say that word, but yeah, like those little things. A lot of people could be like, "Oh, I'm writing this off as stupid," but like he just pulls you in, and it's great for him.
It makes sense
This
for the
episode,
character.
yeah,
Someone who is like bored. Like
yeah, social
I
distance
can't remember
champion.
I can't remember which content creator said it, but they said, yeah, it's like watching an employee on their last day. Like,
Yeah,
I'm checked
yeah.
out of this. I don't care. Like, oh what? Oh what? Anyway, when
And
he
I
says
mean, literally, it is his last day in
could be
that whole setup
potentially.
for
I
sure.
mean,
Potentially,
I
yeah.
believe he knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I
But
think it's a con. I think it's a con for him. Like, hey, I kind of want to have some fun and conquer
no, like
again or something like that.
I believe that there's a threshold that gets hit where he doesn't actually have a script for what's going to happen, but he says this line which makes me think he has a very good idea of what's going to happen, which is you can't get to the or sorry, what you can't get to the end if you haven't been changed by the journey.
Yeah.
So he has obviously been changed by the journey. Loki has obviously been changed by the journey. I guess we find out that Sylvie has not been changed by the journey.
Yeah.
I don't know where that puts her then, but I think he is like, yeah, like you're gonna kill me. There's no chance you're not going to. Like something's gonna happen where I get killed. I think his excitement at that point is like, how will it happen? Like it's going to happen, but like how? Like before he knew every step of the way, but he's just, now he just has the end point. He doesn't really, or even it's not even really the end point. He just has like a beat he knows that has to happen, but what happens in between those beats?
Yeah, it's a very interesting scene to me because like the way he plays out all the dialogue, all the interactions, all everything, it seems like he's just trying to drive a wedge between the both of them from the sake of I want to manipulate these two to see which one of these two Lokis is going to end up being the last Loki. Like I genuinely thought like he's trying to pit them to get them to kill each other and be like, oh, it's Loki that's going to take over and like rule the rest of the world, and it'd be like oppression based and all this kind of stuff. And then like, oh, Sylvie won, so it would be like literally the multiverse and all this kind of stuff. I think he was just like, I'm at the end of my rope. I kind of don't care. The cycle repeats itself anyways, all this kind of stuff. I just want to break or something like that.
No, he is planting a seed of doubt between them because
yes,
obviously what he does know is when they work together, they'll actually accomplish what they need to accomplish, which isn't what he's there for. He is there to get what he wants accomplished. So he needs to break them up. I don't think he's thinking I'm going to have them kill each other. It's just all he needs to do is plant that seed of doubt, and it works the way he wants it to work.
Yeah.
Where Sylvie is basically like, oh yeah, fuck this. I had a plan. I'm following through. I don't care about all of this other shit. Which is why I'm saying the journey didn't change her. But I think it's a very simple, like the show has already shown us when they work together, they actually accomplish their goals. He doesn't really want them to accomplish their goals. He needs them to do what he wants. So let me break this up.
Yeah.
But yeah,
good point.
He does do that, and I don't know if like we're really going to dig into this, but he does explain basically what led to the multiversal war, which is it was just a bunch of variants of him that they got along for a bit and then they didn't, and he was able to harness the power of Eliath, and that's why he's on top at this moment. But as soon as you get rid of all of that, then they'll just be back. And the what he calls the gambit is like, if you think I'm bad, wait till you meet my variants.
You know, it's funny to me. It's like there's so many elements of this. I'm like, obviously, so many comparisons to so many other sci-fi like storytellings of variants and multiverses and all that kind of stuff. But in this scene, I couldn't help but think, I'm like, oh, this kind of feels like Jet Li is the one, where like he's killing versions of himself to accumulate power within himself and all this kind of stuff. And like in this version, he's not trying to accumulate power. He's already got that power, but he's like, to me, I'm like, he's
trying to maintain it. He doesn't want to lose it. And
he doesn't want to lose it, but it's genuinely interesting to see what he wants in this. Like he wants to drive a wedge between the both of them, but because the timeline actually breaks and he genuinely is like, hey, we've hit the threshold. I don't know if he actually was like, I'm supposed to keep doing this after these two leave my citadel, which is beautiful, by the way. The Kinsekori like aesthetic is just absolutely gorgeous, and that fourth statue being broken is pretty interesting to me. So I mean, there's theories about that. I don't think we're going to get into it too much, but
I do not care about that one bit.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah,
I care about it a
it
little
seems
bit, but
like such a weird thing to be fixated on in a show like this, where I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know, man. Like, you're just gonna tell me when I need to know, I guess.
yeah, because it's just like, oh, you're just gonna reset anything everywhere, anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just like there's a lot of inaccuracy, like there's a lot of inconsistencies in the shows too, because I guess we're getting to the point now where like Sylvie does succeed, Loki's back in the TVA.
Well, no, we're not there.
Or
Yet.
what we
We're not
okay,
there.
yeah. enough.
Basically, yeah. So he's like, look, this is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You guys carry on my work, or terrible things will happen. And what I liked about this was this seems like the same energy the TVA in general had in the first episode of like, yeah, let Loki run his little schemes. It doesn't matter. Like you can call Mortis a liar. He does not care because he has the confidence of knowing what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So like you can do everything you want in between because he knows ultimately what will happen, and that they are ultimately powerless in this situation. So I really like that. As much as he seems kind of out of it, he's very clear on that one point of like, they either take my deal and they're idiots, or they kill me and I'll be back anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So I liked all of that, and I liked that Sylvie, I can't remember what she says to him at one. Oh yeah, she was basically like, so you just use these people's lives like a game. And he's like, grow up, you hypocrite, you murderer. And then when he turns to Loki, he's like, we're all villains here, which is a very good point. Is that like they've all done villainous things here, and he's like, so grow up and realize that like now you'll be doing bad things for good reasons.
Yes.
Again, I don't really think he's doing like a hard sell. I think he's kind of just like this. These are the facts. Like if you just do what I say, it's for a good reason, and you'll still be doing bad things, and you have been doing bad things up until this point.
Yeah.
So like, don't give me that bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I would only imagine to be like He Who Remains, like that title. Like you can't be all morally good, because that ultimately would create the Thanos situation where like you have people starving themselves to death if you say yes to everything, right? And if you say no to everything, then that means you're going to be a villain on some level, knowing like, hey, I know that this tsunami is going to come out and wipe this entire village out or whatever, but I kind of have to let it happen. Otherwise, population control or whatever will create this issue later on. It's just like that level of everything. It's like, yeah, you kind of need someone that rides that moral gray zone in order to be this person. And like, I love the part where he's like, just grow up. Like, you hypocrite, you just grow up. You've been like chasing this thing for such a long time. You technically got it. Congratulations. But what are you going to do now that this is the situation in front of you? It's such an interesting scene.
And then this is where we get to the threshold thing where he is like, I fibbed. Like I said, I knew everything. I knew everything up until 7 seconds ago. I still think this is a performance, but what I like about the performance is that when they start getting angry, he kind of jumps in his seat like, oh my goodness, like finally something new is happening. I did not see this coming. And yeah, they kind of have their fight, which I guess starts off verbally of just not being on the same page. And this is where Sylvie's like, oh, so you were just tricking me this whole time, which we know obviously hurts Loki, who thinks like he finally found someone who trusts him and understands him.
Yeah.
So to like get pushed, like rebuff like that, like
he even says that, doesn't he? He's like, is that what you think of me?
Yeah.
It's like he's really hurt by that statement for sure.
This is what I'm saying. He has been changed by the journey. It's just
absolutely.
Think about how much time he's not talking. Think about how much he's not doing anything. And then this fight is like,
it's him not trying to change the outcome. It's him being like, okay,
let's just wait and see. And it's actually doesn't get through to her at all.
I mean,
it's whatever.
To be
like,
fair, I don't think anything would have gone through to her.
But this is what I'm saying, how ineffectual he is that you've built up Sylvie to be this point, And that's what I mean. She's the active character. She is the one that is doing things. And
Mhm.
even though what she's doing is all a part of
Yeah.
someone else's grand scheme, she's
Mhm.
at least doing something. It is the Thor thing of
Mhm.
thinking it's the Indiana Jones thing of thinking you're doing something to change
Mhm.
the course of things, as
Yeah.
opposed to just being like, oh man, I guess it's happening.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because it's basically uphold status quo or make massive change and gamble on everything, right?
Well, I
Um,
don't think that's what I mean, yes, he does
that's what
say
the
if we
choice
get rid
overall.
of,
Yeah.
that's their choice. I don't know
Yeah.
if Loki was like, let's just uphold status quo. I think he was doing the Black Widow thing of, at least if we have one hand on the wheel, we can somewhat control it, as
Yes.
opposed to no hands on the wheel, which
Yeah.
is killing him and then bringing on the bigger devil, or like whatever
Mhm.
fills that void that they can't actually control. I think
Yeah.
that's what he was suggesting.
No, he's definitely
Um,
suggesting that. He's definitely like, yeah, you cut off like you cut this off. We know that there's going to be a different variant that's more evil. We know within our own
and it's not just
selves.
one. It's like he said, it's
Countless. Yeah.
there's countless of them. They're all
Yeah.
going to be flooding in.
He
It's
says
not
like
going to
what
be like a
because
thing you
yeah,
deal with one at a time.
it's one person that like does it, and then literally everyone arms up and goes like, no, we got to defend our sacred timeline, and then like war breaks out amongst all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
And so
yeah,
basically
sure.
why I find this to be an issue is that you're resetting Loki. So he was
Yeah.
changed by the journey, but by the time he gets knocked back, so they do the kiss,
Yeah.
whatever, and she says, why don't we see this the same way? And he's like, because you don't trust and I'm not to be trusted. And he tries to say, hey, we are the same, which he has been trying to do the whole show, I believe.
Mhm.
He keeps pointing out like, well, that's not what I love about. And again, she hasn't changed. She's like, well, I am not you. I've been saying this since the beginning.
Mhm.
I'm not you. Get the fuck out of here. I'm going to do what I need to do. But
Yeah.
at that point, obviously he's back to thinking, oh, I'm alone and I'll always be alone. So all that
Mm.
progress he had is gone, because one, he can think it, and then by the time he gets back to two people who, well, one is definitely his friend, the other could be his friend in B15,
Mhm.
they don't even know who he is. So he is
Mhm.
actually alone, and he is mentally alone and emotionally alone
Oh, I
by the
see what
end
you
of this. So
mean.
I feel like it's
Yeah.
all just one big reset. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
he did have this whole change, and then you put him in an emotional state where he feels like he's back at square one, and then you physically put him back at square one.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, why?
Yeah. It's just like he's more tortured than ever now. He's like lower than where we first saw him, right? Which is like,
Yeah, like
hey, you fight like that scene after is like, hey, guess what? Here's how your life plays out. You lose the battle of New York. You lose this, and you get killed by Thanos and all this kind of stuff. He's like pretty broken down by that because he obviously thinks he can like weasel his way out or win at some point in time, and it's confirmed, no, you're a loser. He gets that confirmation, and then now he just loses again. But this time he's like, hey, at least I don't have to be a loser alone. And then boom, you're right. He's literally alone because the Mobius thing is reset. And it's
well, I don't know if he's
TS.
reset. I think he's in a different timeline.
See, this is the part where the show's inconsistencies are like really bothering me. I was under the impression.
Let's walk through it.
Yeah.
I don't want to just jump to that.
Yeah,
Basically,
fair.
he gets sent back.
Yeah.
All the stuff I said happens in terms
Mhm.
of what they've done to the character at the end
Mhm.
of 6 episodes.
Mhm.
Sylvie does kill Immortus. He says, see you soon. He winks at her. He's out. I think, I don't even know. I won't ever make that statement ever again. I don't remember seeing her face. I know you see her body. Her body language is very much like, ah, fuck.
Yeah.
maybe I was a bit rash.
It's kind of like
what I get from her.
What
body.
the fuck did I just do? Kind of deal.
That's
It's like
that's what I get from her body language.
That's
it's
from
like,
that's what I got from the whole response. It's like, boom, I did it. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I gotta sit in the mess now. Or whatever. I caused this.
So yeah, that happens, and then again we see our Mobius and our B15 watch all the branches. As I said, it's more of our characters just watching, and like it's our lead. I won't even say Mobius is the lead anymore, but they gave him so much time that I'm like, why? Because
Mhm.
this all could have been B15 if this is
Mhm.
what we're gonna be doing. But anyway, so they're just watching the branches come, and this is where I said yes, they double down on having this journey having changed them, of being like, yeah, like we're not turning back. B15's like, well, that was never an option for me. Like, we're gonna stay the course, we're gonna ride this out and
Mhm.
um do the right thing.
Mhm.
And then Loki's back, like we think is with that B15 and that Mobius, but
Yeah.
instead he goes and yeah, he's basically, oh no, like we did a bad thing and we gotta figure it out. And this Mobius doesn't even know what a Loki is. Like he's
Yeah.
just like, who
Or
are he
yeah.
just assumes you're an analyst. I don't know your name.
Yeah.
Who are you? And then
Mhm.
yeah, Loki turns around, he sees the Kang. Think that's why I think it's just a different timeline. And
It
yes,
is a
what
different
you're saying,
timeline
what you're
too.
saying is
Yeah.
true, is that we were to understand the TVA to be separate from the
Yes,
timeline. But
because
I
one
don't
of
think that's true.
yeah, I don't think that's true. Well, it's confirmed to be not true right now because it's not TVA anymore. I paid attention. I saw this. It was like TSY or something
Yeah.
like that, and I'm just like, okay. And instead of the three
Yeah, it's just
timekeepers,
Kang.
we have Kang in his comic accurate suit and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, to be
And
clear, not Immortus. It was the
yeah,
Kang
this is the
outfit. Yes.
Kang outfit, not Immortus, right? And we're like, okay, confirmation, it's Kang. It confirmed all this kind of stuff, and this is the Kang ruled dominated timeline or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
the question that really confuses me is like we were led to believe that TVA is independent from everything, and kind of like independent from the loop of time that
Hmm.
exists. And so, with that being said, that is confirmed to be not the case. So it's just like, what is what? I don't get it.
Yeah, this is why when people are like, "Oh, what's this statue?" Or what, I'm like, I don't give a fuck, because dude, like
Yeah,
anything you think you can actually lean on in terms of bearings for making educated guesses will just be pulled out from under you.
I agree. I
I'm just like, I don't like. It doesn't
yeah,
make it a bad show. I want to be clear. That doesn't make this a bad show. It just makes me not care to like lean into it that much. I'm like,
it's yeah, it's a bridging thing.
I guess I will just let this wash over me, and I'll take
Mhm.
from it whatever I get episode by episode, because and it's not about like hurt feelings about being wrong. Like, as I said, I really like this episode. This was a good episode of TV.
Mhm.
It's obviously helped that I really like Jonathan Major's performance and I like the Kang character in general.
Mhm.
But like, it's when I try to fit this into what the rest of the show was doing where it seems uneven.
Yeah,
Regardless if you like this or
very.
you like, it's uneven because one, it's the problem I said they might have if they decide to be like, oh, it was Kang, like it's gonna be a Mortis in that tower. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know, man. Like, why wouldn't it be someone that we already saw? And I know that the argument can be made. They've been hinting at him the whole time based on what we saw, but like,
Yeah,
it wasn't a tangible character that we got to spend any time with.
right.
It's just, if you know comics, you know what's coming,
Yeah.
which doesn't
Yeah.
work for me in terms of like the impact you it's why for me Infinity War works so well. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter that we know those characters will come back after they're dusted. It matters that the characters that are still there feel a loss. We
Yeah.
feel their loss. It means something to the characters living it. It's not just
Yeah.
performative for the audience,
There's real stakes in that
for the
kind of
people that
thing.
we are
In
watching.
yeah, in this, it doesn't seem like there's real stakes because it's just like, oh, keep hitting reset and keep transforming everything and keep changing things up and leave people exactly where we found them. It's just, it's weird. You're right. You're absolutely right to point that out. Like Loki's exactly where he's at. Like the change that he did, it's
He might be
inconsequential.
lower, but
Yeah.
he's not like he hasn't been fundamentally changed by the experience. He's gone through an
No.
experience and been like, well, I was right all along then.
Yeah.
I'll just
He
be
yeah.
alone, and I am alone.
Yeah. Well, we don't know if that he's doubling down on that loner kind of situation yet, or if
No, I'm
he's still going
saying
to be vulnerable and trying to
that is
reach
what
out
you
next
read on his
season.
face at the end and what he says. Oh, that's what you thought of me. And then he says, of course, evil Loki's plan has finally hatched. Or like, he's saying,
Mhm.
oh, this is what everyone always thinks about me. And it's true, even for someone I thought understood me.
Well, yeah, and that's the hardest thing when you're vulnerable and that vulnerable person, that person you're vulnerable with reveals themselves to be very much like everyone else, that you're just like, oh, this sucks because I hurt myself. I let this happen. And it's a
So he's going to be guarded again, or
Yeah.
if they're writing this properly, he would need to be guarded at least for the first episode.
Yeah,
or they can do it, or they can do a time jump and be like, no, he's back to where he was on episode 5.
Yep.
Fine. But what I'm saying is, like, in terms of a second season, why would I not just assume that now he's just like he was in episode 1 of season 1, in terms of we had this journey with him, as you rightfully pointed out, where a bunch of things changed him. I was wrong to say he just changed in the first episode. The more I think about it, yeah, there were so many different pieces in each episode where he's changing, and a big one I think is that time loop with Sif, where he basically, we get that confirmation of like, this is the actual key to unlocking why he is the way it is that he's doing these things because he already understands or he has a perceived notion of what people think of him. So he's playing into that way. When they give him the negative attention or anything, he can be like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so now that he's tried to reach out and do it in earnest and not fuck around, and it didn't work, why wouldn't he just go back to what he was doing before and guard himself, like guard his heart again? Yeah. And to be clear, it's not, we're not talking about the idea that it's like, hey, to be vulnerable, to reach out is to get your way, and that's what you mean to like, oh, because but it's the idea of like, no, he was rejected and he's alone now. Like, it wouldn't mean that he can manipulate her just because he was honest with her. It's the idea that it wasn't just a difference of an opinion. It was that she completely rejected what he was saying because she just assumed he was trying to trick her. And assumed the absolute worst of him. That literally everyone else that doesn't know him would assume of him. And that's what hurts the most. And that's why you're right, from a writing standpoint, we would only expect for him to be guarded. And even more so at this point in time. Because it's like, hey, even when I know what history does for me and I keep playing out those things and I make a different change, it's going to treat me, history or the universe or whatever entities out there right now that they want to attribute everything to, will still treat me the exact same way. They will still treat me like the villain. They will still treat me like the stepping stone. So what's the point? Is where he would naturally go. And I don't want to see that character, really, because all that character is going to do is, right, so who's the next person that's going to reach out and like help him out? And now, like, you know what I mean? It's weird because it makes it seem like his growth is dependent on other people too, and that sucks. Yeah, I think that's, I know that people really like this because it's like, well, now look what we have in the MCU. And I'm like, and I've acknowledged that that is a completely valid way of enjoying something like this. But I've always said, how well will these shows service the title characters? And I don't think this show serviced Loki as strongly as the other two shows. Yeah, you're right. WandaVision definitely serviced those characters very, very well. Captain America and Winter Soldier definitely serviced those characters very, very well and built up other characters too. Yeah. This one, it's just like, it didn't build up other characters that we're going to see again unless we see, I can't young Loki, basically. I can't even say we're never going to see them. I'm just saying, we the same way that, like, I won't go down that path. I think that we got to see an evolved version of Loki, but doesn't feel like the Loki we'll see moving forward into the next time we see him. Yeah. It seems like we'll get that guarded. I mean, maybe the change is just, we know that he was trying to guard his heart this whole time. Maybe that's what we've learned from this. I just feel that, like, with Scarlet Witch in particular, with Wanda, like, that is, she's learning more about herself. So she's got, and same with Loki, but at the end of it, she has evolved to something, or you can call it devolved, but she has shifted gears. Yeah, she's changed. At the end of her experience, she has changed. She has changed, and there's going to be consequences that come along with that. With Loki, the consequences are for everybody. It's not like oh wow, this is going to be something he has to reckon with. Yeah, it's like everyone's going to have to reckon with this multiversal war. Like, it's what you said. It feels like this feels like such a setup. It feels like a stepping stone. If
It
if that
definitely
was
is.
their thesis, it's like, maybe you went too meta with that one. That
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, like, so then we just watched this so that we could get to the multiverse. There was,
Yeah.
like, as I've said, both shows before this have given us paradigm shifts
Mhm.
while also making me feel like, oh, like I have gone deeper with this character.
Mhm.
And that going deeper will be meaningful the next time I see them.
Mhm.
Whereas this one, yeah, we have a huge paradigm shift, but this could have been attached to any show, I guess, then.
Yeah.
Or you could have made a show just for this. You could have made a Kang show
Mhm.
for this. You could have just made a TVA show and not involve Loki.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like it was so specific to Loki that this
Right.
happened. It just felt like, who's the character people like?
Yeah.
All right, Loki.
Let's get him
That's how
to
we'll do
star
it.
this. You know what the interesting thing is when people like, and you'll have to listen to our Black Widow episode to hear this out, because I was dying to talk about some of the mirroring things here, which are really really funny, that highlight double standards. It really really does, in the sense where a lot of people are pissed off about Taskmaster being inconsequential, rewritten, all that kind of stuff, not having that back history. I'm like, if those people are not mad about where Loki ends up in this series, I feel like they're really, really, really not thinking that argument through, in the sense where, to me, this series, it's great. It does a lot of fun things. It gives us a lot to talk about, and it sets up everything, but it does a disservice. It actually does a disservice to Loki, the character, and where in our experience, in our journey with him.
I mean, yes, I think if it was just this season, I would definitely agree with you.
Mhm.
My thing is why I had to kind of just relinquish any kind of like true passion for this was when I was like, oh, it's going to be like just a TV show, so like they could have
Yep.
5 seasons of this. It's like, I don't know, then like, or we don't know where this show ultimately wants him to end up. It's just like the other two shows were considered like mini series, like limited
Mhm.
series, right? Like WandaVision is leading to uh
Doctor Strange,
Doctor
Multiverse of
Strange 2,
Madness.
Multiverse of
Yep.
Madness. We found out at the end Falcon and Winter Soldier was leading to Captain America 4.
Yes.
So while they could have other shows, it doesn't feel, or sorry, other seasons, it doesn't feel like that's the next step. Whereas
No. It
they
feels
went to
like
the
the
point
next
of
step for
doing
them is
a
movie,
post
for
credit
sure.
for Loki is just a stamp saying he'll be back in season 2. And it's like, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously not everyone knew that, but we brought that up last episode when
Yep.
I said, yeah, like they're going to have a season 2, so they can
Mhm.
just keep pulling the rug. So for me, yeah, like they really are trying to make it clear, like this is a TV show, like this, we're gonna
Mhm.
keep doing this. So I can't really get that like heated about like where they left him, because it is just like, well, I guess we'll see what happens next season, but
Yeah.
it does feel like, well, we just set him back to square one, which
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on that. I absolutely agree.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
fair.
I thought the series was gonna end with Loki still in the Citadel and Sylvie having stabbed him and been like, oh shit, what do we do? And then Loki being like, we'll figure it out together. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. That's, character progression, stakes, like all that kind of stuff, and then cut right there. But what we got was just, no, let's separate Loki again. And let's also devolve Sylvie's character too, because let's remember Sylvie's character had a lot to do with reaching out, and arguably did a lot more character growth, having been, she never really had anyone to reach out with. Like, at least Loki had Thor and the Warriors 3 and Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 to have adventures with and good times with. Ladies, like Sylvie never had that at all her entire life.
Well, this is why I say I don't think she had that much character growth, because we don't really know her, right? Like, we learn more about her, yes, but I think what we ultimately learn is she's not a trusting person.
Yes, she's too guarded,
which isn't something that changed throughout the show. It's just Loki is trying his best, but again, he's an ineffectual character. He's trying his best to get her to trust and be with him on this journey. But she's not there. And I think it was even brought up by B15, like, oh no, like this is a revenge thing for her. So like she needs this to happen. This isn't like a nice to have or just like, oh, that would be nice. Like this is something that she genuinely needs to have happen.
Yep.
No one's gonna sway her. And I think we had this conversation, maybe it was off mic after the first episode as well, when we knew that Lady Loki was coming. Sylvie, we learned her name to be, was that like either she was going to reframe Loki or he would reframe her. And it seems like she was part of him being reframed, but then she was also the very reason that he went right back to where he started.
Yep.
But at no point is he changing her. She's still just like testing the waters out and then being like, oh yeah, no, I was right. I don't need to trust anyone.
Yeah, it's a very weird ending spot for both of them, because at this point, I don't like, where do we expect to see these characters again? Season 2, we're probably going to see them a little bit like before that, and maybe other kind of iterations if we're really thinking about this. But it's so many questions at this point, and such a major setup for Phase 4. It really did feel like Disney Plus. Here's what we can do, and this is great, and we want more because you did a great job with WandaVision and a great job with Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And those are graduating on to movies, obviously, next. But this literally felt like, no, we're in Phase 4 now. We're doing the movie stuff now. It felt like a actual break from that. It felt like this was a phase in itself, and it felt like, okay, the next phase is in the movies again. It's a very interesting feeling. I don't know if that's just because of, I guess, where we are at in regards to Ontario and Toronto and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. But it does have that feeling of like, here are the Disney Plus series for the first phase of it. Even though like What If is coming very, very soon, and potentially could be very, very the stories could actually be canon, in the sense where it's like, no, it's not just them telling one-off stories. Like, they could have actually happened before they put the timeline back together, whatever that might look like. And it's very, very just, wow, where do we go from here? But as a series itself, it suffers from it's giving people more content to talk about, more theories to generate and all that kind of stuff, but people aren't talking about the actual show itself.
Yeah,
which is
that's what
a problem.
That's what happened with all three of them. It's just it's just this time people got what they wanted out of it instead of an actual show.
Yeah, there was
they just got a building block to
something. Or Immortus, we should say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it still has Kang at the end. Like it's
correct.
a statue, but it is still acknowledging. But yeah, let's rate this season.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a 7.5. It was at an 8, and the more I talked about it, the less I was that enthused with it.
Yeah, you know what, I'm between either a 6.5 or a 7, to be perfectly honest, because I liked it, but you're right. The moment you brought it up, it's like, wait, that just makes the DB Cooper thing seem like a Family Guy gag. It doesn't. It just, like, the moment you said that, I was like, oh damn it, yeah, you're so right about that. And I'm like, that's very disappointing. In the sense where it's like, how do you fairly accurately judge this series based on the fact that it did what it did? The trailer and promotional material basically did a Suicide Squad beat, in the sense where they promised us a different show than we actually got. The show that we actually got was good, but then it leads basically nowhere. And it literally is the biggest criticism for Iron Man 2 for not being good. So I don't understand why people are fan gushing over this, except for the reason that
I think people have just crossed the threshold of
maybe
cynically. I think they've crossed the threshold into being cynical consumers of this content. I think people before were like, no, a movie should be a movie. This is how you do a movie. And then they're like, no, Marvel is just the thing that leads to something else.
Yep.
And I think that is what we're seeing as people talk about these shows in particular.
So you see,
is that they've just shifted to and I'm not saying MCU is pure cinema. I'm saying it is its own thing, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you throw everything out the window in
Yeah.
terms of storytelling.
Exactly.
And so if someone wants to enjoy it just because it had amazing cameos and it introduced a bunch of stuff, that's perfectly fine. That doesn't make me dumber or smarter than you. It doesn't make you smarter or dumber than me.
Yeah.
I'm saying on this show, what I am
Mhm.
marking this on was how well I feel it serviced the characters that we were spending these 6 weeks with.
It's an excellent way
Um,
of putting it. Yeah.
and I don't think it did it that well. I don't think
Yeah.
it serviced this character because I'm never looking at any of these things to be like the introduction to something else. I like that when it does introduce a bunch of stuff while doing what I talked about, servicing whichever character we're talking about well.
Yeah. No, you very, very, very good point. This series, out of all three of them, serviced the titular character the least out of all of them. Arguably, I would say Captain America Winter Soldier serviced that character the most. But I mean, that's
both of them.
not
it had
fair
two
to say.
characters, and it still serviced them really well.
Yeah. Versus,
I guess WandaVision is two characters.
WandaVision had two characters too, but the thing is like, oh, we had to actually say goodbye to a version of the character. We're actually saying goodbye to that Vision, and we have to say hello to whatever this version of Vision is whenever this version of Vision shows up.
Well, that Vision did pass on
way.
its memories, so it is technically a Vision that has all the memories of what
right,
we
the
have.
ship discussion. Yeah. But
so
whether or not it's going to do
really
the same thing,
goodbye.
We don't know. Yeah,
but yeah,
true.
Your point stands. Is that it's what
same,
we both
same,
said.
But
the two shows before this actually felt like they cared about their main character.
Yep.
Over introducing something new, even though both
Yes.
shows, as I continue to say, introduced something new.
Yes.
More than one thing new. We actually got Scarlet Witch, not just Wanda Maximoff.
Yeah.
We got White Vision, we got Spectrum, we got Speed, we got Wiccan. We got
Harkness.
Agatha Harkness. Like we got a lot of great stuff. And then in Falcon and Winter Soldier, we got our new Captain America. We have an evolved Winter Soldier. We have the new Falcon. We have introduction of Isaiah Bradley. Captain America, and Elijah Bradley, Patriot. Like
Patriot, yeah.
All of these shows are bringing, and yes, we do have Kid Loki, who will be part of the Young Avengers. We have new things in this, but it seemed like the show was more interested in, hey, here's the new shiny thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to what are we going to do with Loki?
Yeah, because the thing with WandaVision, it built out the world of sorcery a lot more, and obviously that with Wanda, the Captain America Winter Soldier stuff built out that just dynamic of race and being black and white spaces and all that kind of stuff.
But even more than that, it gave
Sam
us his voice. Even if you don't want to think about it in black and white, and because I know people get upset when race gets involved, but if you're just talking about that one character, he went from being the sidekick guy to being like, no, I do deserve to be the leader. I have a voice, and it ends with him talking to heads of state about what they need to do better. And it gives, and I know that he's going to have a lot of work to do. It gives Bucky a bit more peace of mind going forward. So if we're not gonna, I mean, you've listened to our 6 episodes about Falcon and Winter Soldier. It was all about race for me. But even if you don't want to deal in those things, that show gave us a better version of the character after it came out of it.
Yeah, it did the service of actually evolving a character into another character while still remaining. Like, evolve is the best way, because I'm like, the wings still remain. We're not getting a Captain America where there's no wings. He's still got the wing aspect of everything. He's earned the stripes, the shield, whatever you want to call it, because he's trained with it. This is the journey he went through to be recognized as Captain America, however you want to call it. Like, that show is good for that. And it's building out the world.
All right, too much Captain America stuff.
For sure. But Loki, it doesn't build out that Asgardian side of things. It doesn't build out that world, that realm, that whatever. It's just like, it leaves us into the MCU again. And that, although that's great, that is everyone's primary criticism against Iron Man 2 for being a good movie. So there needs to be recognition for that double standard, is all I'm saying in regards to this.
100% agree. But yeah, that's That's Loki. That is our coverage. I guess we'll be back
Mhm.
for season 2. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. That means we're part of a network with great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing
Mhm.
Reels, Composers, a whole bunch of great things. So please head on over there. If you want to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, go to tdfeverything.com/spoiled rotten. Our Twitter is at tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, whole bunch of places. So please head on over there, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. And I
Yeah.
guess let's look forward to What If.
Definitely share this with your friends because a lot of people do not think what we think. I can guarantee you that we've had some time to sit with this for a while. Well, I've had some time to sit with this and really confidently been like, I'm going to say this on air. We've had time to like really brew and let this marinate. So this is how we genuinely feel about it.
Excellent.
Let's have a talk if you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.